There is a place on the map where the lines almost give up. Halfway between Norway, Iceland and Scotland, in a stretch of the North Atlantic so grey and so violent that for centuries sailors marked it with a warning rather than a name, 18 islands break the surface of the ocean like the spine of something enormous and sleeping. They have no forests to speak of, no motorways in the sense you know them. On most days they have no sun, only a moving argument between fog and light. And yet, for more than 1,000 years, people have not just survived here. They have built a civilization out of grass, stone, wool, and stubbornness. This is the story of the Faroe Islands, a country of 54,000 people and 70,000 sheep, where the weather can change 4 times before you finish a sentence, where villages cling to cliffs by their fingernails, and where a road can suddenly dive beneath the ocean and come up on the far side of the sea. We came here to answer a simple question. How do you make a home at the edge of the world? And why would anyone choose to stay? To understand the Faroe Islands, you first have to understand where they aren't. They aren't part of the mainland of anything. The nearest neighbour, the Shetland Islands, is more than 300 kilometres away across open water. Iceland is farther still. Norway, the ancestral homeland of most Faroese, is nearly 700 kilometres to the east. On a globe, the Faroes are barely a smudge, a cluster of green and black specks in a great empty blue, closer to the Arctic Circle than to any capital city you could name off the top of your head. There are 18 islands in total. 17 of them are inhabited. Together, they cover about 1,400 square kilometres, smaller than many single cities, and yet no point of land is more than 5 kilometres from the sea. The ocean is always there. You can be standing in the middle of the largest island and still hear it, smell it, feel the salt of it on the wind. The islands rise almost vertically out of the water. This is not a gentle coastline of beaches and dunes. It is a coastline of cliffs, some of the highest sea cliffs in the world, where the land simply stops and drops 700, 800, 900 meters straight down into the surf. From the air, they look like a layer cake that a giant has sliced with a single clean cut. That layering is the first clue to how this place was born, and we'll come back to it. The Faroese have a word that appears again and again when you talk to them about their home. Utoik, the outer islands. But in a sense, the entire country is an outer island. This is a nation defined by remoteness, by the distance between itself and everywhere else. And that distance shaped everything. The language, the food, the architecture, the temperament of the people, even the way they bury their dead and name their children. When you first arrive, and most people arrive by air now, dropping through the cloud onto a single runway on the island of Vágar, the scale rearranges something in your head. Mountains that should be distant are suddenly on top of you. A waterfall you noticed on the horizon turns out to be 400 meters tall. A village that looked like a handful of monopoly houses is home to families whose ancestors have lived on that exact patch of grass for 40 generations. There is a particular feeling here that visitors struggle to name. It is not quite loneliness, and it is not quite awe. It is closer to the sensation of being very small in a very old place, of standing on something that does not care whether you live or die, and finding that strangely comforting rather than frightening. The Faroese have lived inside that feeling their whole lives. To them, it is simply Tuesday. Over the next hour, we're going to take you across all 18 of these islands. We'll trace how they rose out of a burning ocean 60 million years ago, and how the first humans found them. We'll stand in the world's smallest capital and on the deck of boats that feed a nation. We'll climb to bird cliffs where men once dangled on ropes for their supper. And we'll confront the most controversial tradition in the North Atlantic. And we'll try, by the end, to understand what it actually means to belong to a place like this. But it begins, as everything here begins, with the rock. Look closely at almost any cliff in the Faroe Islands, and you are looking at the past. These islands are made almost entirely of one thing: rock that was once molten. 60 million years ago, this was one of the most violent places on Earth. Not that you would know it now, standing in all this green silence. But the evidence is everywhere, written into the walls of every fjord. See the horizontal stripes running along the cliffs. Each dark band is a separate flood of lava, layered one on top of another. Flood after flood, over millions of years, until the rock stood hundreds of meters thick. In places, the lava cooled into perfect columns of stone. 6-sided pillars, packed together like something built rather than born. Between some of the dark layers, you can pick out thinner bands of red. That red is ancient soil, proof that life grew here in the pauses between eruptions. The Faroes were green and forested once, in a warmer world long gone. On the southern island of Suðuroy, that lost world left something behind. Coal. Buried seams of it, the crushed remains of forests that no longer exist. Then came the ice, and it went to work on all that stone. You can still see exactly what it carved. The wide U-shaped valleys were bulldozed out by ancient glaciers. The deep, straight fjords are where the ice cut all the way down to the sea. High on the mountainsides sit rounded hollows the Faroese call botnur, scooped out by ice and now cradling still, dark mountain lakes. When the ice finally melted, the sea rose and poured into the lowest valleys. One block of land became the 18 separate islands we know today. It explains their strange shape, long, narrow, and lined up in parallel, divided by deep, straight sounds, as if something enormous had raked its fingers through the land. And the sea has never stopped working. It still chews at the islands, tearing pieces loose from the cliffs. Off the northern tip of Eysturoy stand 2 of those pieces. 2 great sea stacks, stranded in the surf, being slowly demolished by the Atlantic. Legend says they are a giant and a witch, sent to drag the Faroes to Iceland. The Faroe Islands are, quite simply, old fire gone cold and green. And the people who eventually arrived built their whole lives on top of it. Their houses, their walls, their fields, all anchored to this hardened stone. But people were not the first to find these cliffs. That honor belongs to the birds.
These islands look untouched, but people have been arriving here for well over 1,000 years. Who came first is one of the great mysteries of the North Atlantic. Irish monks are believed to have reached the Faroes centuries before anyone wrote it down. Sailing out into the open Atlantic in tiny hide boats in search of solitude and God. And recently, the soil itself has begun to talk. Buried traces of burnt fuel and grazing animals hint at settlers long before the Vikings. We may never know their names. But someone crossed hundreds of kilometers of ocean to a place with no trees and no easy way home, and stayed. Then, around the 9th century, came the Norse. seafarers from Norway who used these islands as a stepping stone across the Atlantic. You can still stand where they built in villages like Kvívík. Low walls of black stone laid straight onto the rock the lava left behind. They brought their sheep, their language, and their laws to this empty edge of the world. Old Norse, spoken here in isolation for 1,000 years, slowly became Faroese, one of the smallest national languages in Europe and a close cousin of Icelandic. But the Norse did more than farm and fight. They made law. On a rocky finger of land in the harbour, free men gathered to settle their disputes. That assembly, the Lagting, still meets today, which makes it one of the oldest parliaments anywhere on Earth. The capital's very name carries the old gods, Tórshavn, Thor's harbour. There is no fence, no grand plaza, no army of guards, just the seat of a nation's power with the waves slapping the rocks beside it. The Norse did not just settle the Faroes, they set the shape of everything that followed. The sheep, the language, the stubborn habit of self-rule. It all begins on this small rock in the harbour. There is an old Faroese joke. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. If you still don't like it, you're probably not from here. The weather is the single most powerful force in Faroese life, more than the government, more than the sea. It decides when you can travel, when you can fish, when you can film. And it decides whether you can even see the mountain standing directly in front of you. The Faroes sit right in the path of the North Atlantic's weather systems. Warm, moist air from the Gulf Stream collides here with cold Arctic currents. The result is a place that is astonishingly mild for how far north it sits. It almost never freezes hard, and it almost never gets truly warm. But it is wrapped for much of the year in cloud, mist, and rain. There are around 300 days of rain here every year. The wind can arrive with the force of a physical blow. And fog can descend so completely that pilots abandon their approach and turn back out to sea. But this is where something strange happens. Because the weather is so changeable, the light here is unlike anywhere else. A grey, sodden morning can crack open into 10 minutes of impossible golden clarity, the whole landscape lit as if from within, before the cloud closes again like a curtain. Chase sunshine here and you leave frustrated. Chase the breaks and you capture what you can get nowhere else. The Faroese have built their whole culture around this. Houses low and solid, painted deep red and black to hold their warmth against the grey. Turf roofs, grown from the land itself, insulate against the wind and wet. And in the long, dark winters, life moves indoors, to knitting, music, and stories. The arts of a people who spend a lot of time waiting for the sky to change its mind. There is a phrase you'll hear, a quiet motto for bad weather and hard times alike. Ta gongur. It goes on. It'll manage, said with a shrug and a small smile. Because the rain and wind are exactly what make the Faroes what they are. The greenness, the waterfalls, the drama. None of it exists without the grey. Every country has a capital. The Faroes are no exception, but Tórshavn is unlike any other. Around 13,000 people live here, 20,000 if you count the surrounding area. There are neighbourhoods in ordinary European cities with more people than this entire capital. And yet, it functions, in miniature, as a fully realised city. A government, a cathedral, a university, a music and food scene, and traffic that, on a busy morning, might make you wait through one traffic light. The oldest part of the city sits on the rocky peninsula of Mykines, a maze of black-tarred wooden houses with white-framed windows and thick turf roofs. Some of these buildings are 400 years old.
Grass grows on their roofs, wildflowers and all. Walk these lanes on a quiet evening and it is easy to forget which century you are in. But Tórshavn is not a living museum. That is what surprises visitors most. Turn a corner from the old town and you find restaurants, coffee bars, design shops, young people. Chefs here have taken an ancient Faroese larder and turned it into a genuine culinary movement. Fermented lamb, dried fish, root vegetables, inventive, local, uncompromising. The harbour is still the heart of it all. Everything in the Faroes historically came and went through here. Goods, news, people leaving and coming home. Stand here long enough and you will see the whole country pass through. Tórshavn is proof of a quiet Faroese truth. You do not need to be large to be complete. Leave the capital behind and the Faroes reveal their true form. Not a city, a scattering of villages, each one its own small world. There are around 120 of them, placed where three things came together. Workable land for grass and sheep, shelter from the worst wind and swell, and access to the sea, for fish and, until recently, for travel. Take Saxon on the northwest of Streymoy, a handful of buildings in a vast green bowl, cut off from the sea by a storm that choked its harbour with sand. Waterfalls pour down the encircling cliffs. Silence does most of the talking. Or Gjogv on Eysturoy, a name that simply means gorge. The village is built around a sea-filled cleft in the rock that has served as its harbour for generations. And then there is Gásadalur, perhaps the most famous image of the Faroes, a tiny village on a green shelf above the ocean, its waterfall pouring straight off the cliff into the sea. Until 2004, Gásadalur had no road. The dead were carried out over the mountain. Then engineers bored a tunnel through the rock and isolation ended overnight. That is the great transformation of the modern Faroes, connecting the unconnectable, linking villages that were once cut off for months at a time. But the villages remain the soul of the country. Each has its church, its graveyard, its memory of who drowned and who was born and who left and never came back. To be Faroese is still to be from somewhere very specific, a village of 40 people the whole nation somehow knows. Look at any hillside in the Faroes and you will see them. 70,000 of them. More sheep than people on these islands. They are not decoration. They are the foundation of how this place stayed alive. For centuries, there were almost no trees for fuel and almost no grain that would reliably grow. What the land could give, and give without failing, was grass, and from grass came sheep. And from sheep came meat, fat, wool, and the clothes that kept the wind out. Faroese wool is dense, oily, and built for weather, a natural armour against the Atlantic. The traditional sweaters were never fashion, they were survival kit. You can still see the old patterns walking the streets of Tórshavn and the villages today. Hands still work the needles through the long, dark winters. The same patient craft that filled houses when the sky refused to clear. But wool was only half of the bargain. The other half was food that would last. In a place this wet and this isolated, you could not rely on freshness. You had to invent time. Meat smoked, dried and fermented. Fish hung in the wind until it became iron hard. The most famous of these is skerpikjöt, wind-dried lamb, sharp, strong and unmistakably Faroese. It is not a polite flavour. It is the taste of a place that refused to starve. On the plate today, that old larder has found a second life. Young chefs take fermented lamb, local shellfish and root vegetables and treat them as fine dining. Ancient preservation techniques rewritten for a world that arrives by plane. Sheep on the hill, wool on the body, food that adjusts through winter. That triangle of grass, wool and patience is still the quiet engine under Faroese life. Technology has changed. The tunnels and trawlers and heated houses have arrived. but the sheep remain, almost unchanged in 1,000 years. They leave the land looking grazed and alive instead of abandoned, and on a wet afternoon, a heavy wool jumper still feels like the smartest invention on Earth. From the hillside, the next chapter of this story is already calling: the cliffs full of wings.
If the sheep own the hills, the birds own the edge of the world. Long before any human path was cut into these islands, the birds were already here. The Faroes sit in the middle of one of the richest feeding grounds in the North Atlantic. Cold currents push nutrients up from the deep, and the sea fills with life. Where there are fish, there are seabirds, in numbers that only make sense when you stand beneath them. The most famous of them all is the puffin. The Faroese call it lundi, small, round, and endlessly photographed. It looks almost comic on land, then vanishes seaward with a whirring flight that barely seems airworthy. Most of the year, puffins live far out on the open Atlantic. They come ashore only to breed, and only for a short summer window. On islands like Mykines, the grassy slopes become a living city of burrows. Tunnels dug into soft turf, parents arriving with beaks full of sand eels. For a few months, the quiet western islands roar with their traffic. But the puffin is only one voice in a much larger choir. Guillemots stand shoulder to shoulder on bare ledges, eggs pointed so they spin instead of falling. Razorbills, kittiwakes, fulmars and storm petrels fill every available crack. And above them all, the northern gannet folds its wings and drops like a spear into the sea. Some colonies number in the hundreds of thousands. To walk out toward Mykines on a clear summer day is to hear the islands before you see them. The rock itself seems alive, white with guano, dark with basalt, loud with wings. Mykines is the westernmost island, and for many visitors the emotional peak of the Faroes. A tiny settlement, a narrow footpath along the cliffs, and a sea of birds stretching to every horizon. Getting there is never guaranteed. Fog cancels the boat, wind closes the day. That uncertainty is part of the place. The birds stay, the people work around them. For early settlers, this was not a tourist spectacle. It was food. Eggs from the ledges, birds from the cliffs, a supermarket hanging vertically over the ocean. That harvest shaped festivals, skills, and a hard respect for seasons. Today, the breeding cliffs are watched more carefully, and still they define the wild edge of the Faroes. Stand long enough, and the sound becomes its own weather system. Turn away from the cliffs, and the same ocean that feeds the birds feeds the boat.
Turn your back on the bird cliffs, and the same ocean is still working. For the Faroes, the sea is not a backdrop, it is the second farm. Without trees enough for deep agriculture, and with land that mostly grows grass, the Atlantic became the larder. Cod, haddock, herring, mackerel, cold water fish dense enough to build a country on. For centuries, small boats left shelter at first light and gambled everything on weather and luck. Coming home was never a guaranteed part of the story. The old drying racks still stand in some villages, wood skeletons where fish once stiffened in the wind. Salt, wind and time turned the catch into something that could cross winter. That was food security before freezers, before ferries, before tunnels. Then the boats got bigger, the engines louder, and the Faroes found their modern backbone. Commercial fishing and fish farming now carry a huge share of the national economy. Salmon pens float in the sheltered sounds, dark circles of industry against impossible green walls.
It is not romance, it is precision, risk, and constant work on cold water. But it is also the reason a nation of 50,000 people can punch far above its size. Exports leave these harbours every week, headed for tables far beyond the North Atlantic. The same sea that isolates the islands is also the road out. Talk to people here long enough, and the conversation always circles back to water. Who is out? Who is delayed? Whether the swell will let the small boat through the gut. Weather apps are checked the way other places check the news. Because a closed sea is not atmosphere, it is income paused. And yet the Faroese relationship with the ocean is not purely extractive. It is intimate and uneasy. You live from it, you fear it, you measure your year by it. Children learn the names of tides the way city children learn subway stops. The sea feeds the birds, feeds the villages, and underwrites the future the capital is trying to build. Lose the health of these waters, and the whole Faroese story thins out. So every catch carries a quiet question underneath it. What remains for next season? That question sits at the centre of everything coming next.
For most of their history, the Faroes' biggest question was survival. Today, the question is different. What does a future look like at the edge of the map? The tunnels were the first big answer, boring through mountains and under the seabed to stitch the islands together. Villages once cut off for weeks are now a short drive apart. Subsea tunnels link islands that used to depend entirely on weather and ferry schedules. Young people who would once have left for good can stay and still live a connected life. That matters in a nation of only about 50,000. Every person who stays, returns, or chooses to raise a family here is a strategic decision. The economy still rides on fish, wild catch and farmed salmon. But culture, tech, design, tourism and music are no longer side notes. They are part of the new stack. Tourists arrive chasing the cliffs, the light and the silence. The challenge is obvious. How do you welcome the world without sanding off what made the place worth finding? Too much traffic and the magic thins. Too little connection and the village is empty. The Faroes are trying to walk that line in public, openly debating limits, access and pace. Climate adds another pressure the old stories never had to name. Warmer waters, shifting fish stocks, storms that feel less seasonal and more volatile. For a country built on grass, wool, birds and cold water fish, the sea's mood is the ledger. Adaptation here has always been the national talent. Low houses, dense wool, fermented food, tunnels through basalt, a parliament on a wet rock. Different centuries, same instinct. Stay, adjust, continue. Taðgonga is not resignation, it is operating philosophy. The future of the Faroes will not look like a bigger version of somewhere else. It will look like this place deciding, carefully, what it refuses to stop being. A working nation on a stack of volcanic rock in a restless ocean. Still full of sheep, still loud with seabirds, still arguing with the weather every morning. Still answering the oldest Faroese question in real time. Can you live well at the edge and still choose the edge? So that is the Faroes. Not a postcard frozen in mist, a living country with weather in its bones. Fire built the rock, ice and water cut the valleys. Birds claimed the ledges long before anyone named them. Then people came, first as a mystery, then as Norse settlers who stayed. They brought law to a harbour rock and language to an empty edge of the map. They raised sheep on grass the wind could not kill. They knit armour out of wool and patience out of winter.
They read the sea the way other nations read the road. They put villages where land, shelter and water agreed to meet. They bored tunnels through nights that used to last all season. And they kept a phrase soft enough to carry hard years. Tav Gongur. It goes on, it'll manage. Standing here, the old travel fantasy falls apart in the best way. You do not come to the Faroes to escape life. You come to watch a people practice a rarer skill, living precisely where the map gets thin. No big plans can fully prepare you for that. Only the weather can, and the weather always gets the last word.